Madam Speaker, today is a great day of pride for our country and for Democrats.
Yes, guys, that is Nancy Pelosi saying that this is a great day of pride for our country and Democrats, even though we have Americans stranded in Afghanistan and have embarrassed ourselves on the international stage because of President Sleepy Joe Biden, right? I mean, kind of toned down. But she wasn't really talking about that. She was talking about the $3.5 trillion budget blueprint that was passed in the House today. Okay, they convened to discuss Biden's Build Back Better infrastructure plan. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines. $3.5 trillion budget passes. Okay, that's what they say. But that's not exactly right. There's still a long way to go before this thing really passes, which I don't think is going to happen. But there's a long way to go, right? This is just a blueprint. And like I told you guys before, when it comes to this legislative stuff, this is my favorite part about politics. It really is. I love talking about this because it really shows the game within the game of politics. And I love analyzing the game within the game. And let me tell you guys, in this game, it's the moderate Democrats versus the rest of the Democrats, right? The progressives and Nancy Pelosi, okay? Because the moderate Democrats, they have made it clear. We want to vote on the $1 trillion infrastructure package that was passed by the Senate, right? We want that, okay? That's what we want, okay? And we need to go ahead and vote on it now. Let's vote on it now. Let's get it passed, and then we'll consider all the rest of the stuff later. What they really mean is, we might not necessarily do that, right? Because remember, there are moderate Democrats in the Senate, like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, whom has basically come out and say, we don't agree to spending $3.5 trillion. But Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand, has insisted that she is not going to bring the $1 trillion infrastructure package to the floor without a vote on the $3.5 trillion families plan, okay, the social safety net plan, going along with it, right? So Nancy's like, if we don't get both at the same time, then we're not getting any of it. Okay, so obviously this pits Nancy Pelosi against the moderate Democrats in her party, right? And as House Speaker, her job is to bring both sides together to try to get Biden's priorities done. And that's essentially what's happening. And this essentially resulted in a huge fight between Pelosi / progressives and the moderate Democrats in regards to how to get this done. So let me read to you guys, and we're going to talk about what happened. And I'm going to give you guys my opinion on what I think is going to move forward here and what this actually really means. So let's get into it. The House of Representatives nearly approved a budget resolution that provides the framework for a $3.5 trillion spending deal following an impasse between House leaders and centrist Democrats that threatened to derail progress on the vast majority of President Biden's domestic agenda. Tuesday's vote was 220 to 212 among party lines. House leaders used a procedural workaround to avoid a lengthy battle and a separate vote on the budget resolution itself. But the rift between Democrats over how far Congress should go in reshaping the role of the federal government is still unresolved. At odds were a group of moderates who wanted to vote on a Senate-passed bipartisan infrastructure bill instead of following through with a two-track strategy, whereby infrastructure and the broader spending bill would advance in tandem. So basically what this means, guys, is that essentially the moderates, they wanted just the Senate approved $1 trillion bill let's just vote on it now. Okay? They don't want to do both at the same time. However, the other strategy, which Nancy Pelosi is proposing, is the two-track strategy, where they want to pass both of them at the same time. Party leaders say they hope to finish work on a spending bill by October 1st, leaving just weeks to address serious concerns among centrists over the cost of Biden's spending plans. Democrats are attempting to move forward with the spending legislation without the support of any Republicans, a plan that gives leaders a little room for error. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi pursued a strategy of tying the fate of the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill to the broader spending plan full of Democratic priorities. She has repeatedly insisted the House will not vote on the infrastructure bill until the Senate passes the larger spending package. Progressives worry advancing a vote on the infrastructure could lose much needed momentum for a broader budget. After hours of late night talks, Monday, Democratic leaders offered a compromise to the centrists who called for a vote on the infrastructure bill. Pelosi agreed to add the budget vote into a procedural measure and add a provision specifying that the House would vote on the infrastructure bill by September 27th. All right, so what that means is that essentially Pelosi agreed to say, hey, you know what? Let's have a vote on moving forward with the procedural measure to advance the budget reconciliation process, which is the process needed to be done in the House to pass the $3.5 trillion plan. In exchange for that, we're going to add a provision to make sure that we vote in the House on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill by September 27th. Okay? So that's what's happening here. Nancy Pelosi basically said, we'll tie both of them together. So you guys get a vote on the $1 trillion plan, but you have to also vote to move forward with starting the process to pass the $3.5 trillion. That's basically what it means. Okay, doesn't mean that the $3.5 trillion plan passed at all. It just means that they agreed to start the process of filling in the details in regards to what they're going to spend this $3.5 trillion on. All right, so just so this video is not too long, basically that's where we're at right now. They agreed on this. Okay, so what does this mean politically? What does this mean from a political chess match standpoint? Basically, what it means is that despite the headlines, I think that this $3.5 trillion bill is dead in the water. And this is despite the fact that Nancy Pelosi is acting like the progressives and her got some type of victory, because they really didn't. Because here's the thing. They're not expected to really finish the details of that $3.5 trillion plan until after they vote on the bipartisan infrastructure package, right? The $1 trillion plan. Okay? So when September 27th gets here, they probably won't be finished with that $3.5 trillion plan. So if that's the case, and they move forward with a vote on that day, a vote on the $1 trillion plan, then progressives are going to have to make a choice in regards to whether or not they're going to fall in line and vote for it, despite not having any guarantees on the $3.5 trillion plan. Because remember, that's what the progressives want. The progressives are saying, we're going to vote no on the $1 trillion plan if we don't get the $3.5 trillion plan with it. Okay? If they vote yes on it, right? If the Democrats agree and vote yes, it passes the House. It already passed the Senate. It just goes to Biden, and it's up to Biden to sign it at that point. So once it passes, there is no real commitment to continue forward with the budget reconciliation process in regards to the $3.5 trillion plan. Because we also know that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have basically been in the way of the Democrats doing any of their progressive priorities. I mean, in fact, Kyrsten Sinema already came out and said she's not agreeing to $3.5 trillion in spending. And I told you guys before, I mean, you know, a lot of people don't like Mitch, but Mitch is not a dummy, okay? He's been in the game for a long time. He understands the game. Mitch knows that that $3.5 trillion plan won't pass because he knows that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are not going to agree to it. That's the only reason they got on board with the $1 trillion plan in the first place, right? So that's essentially the scenario that the Democrats are facing. Now, let's say that the progressives decide to stand their ground and say, you know what? We don't have any commitments on the $3.5 trillion bill. We're not going to vote yes on this $1 trillion bill. So if they vote no and it doesn't pass the House, then what happens is that that's just dead in the water and nothing gets accomplished for Biden, which is a win for Mitch McConnell and the GOP because they can say, well, we tried. We tried to be bipartisan, but the progressives didn't want to go along with the $1 trillion package, right? It's a win. Biden gets nothing done, and they can say they tried to work with the Democrats. Because if that $1 trillion bill doesn't pass, then that $3.5 trillion bill damn sure isn't going to pass either, okay? So with that being said, I mean, listen, I don't see a scenario where both of these things are going to pass. I just don't. The most likely scenario is that the progressives are going to fold and the $1 trillion bill will pass, but the $3.5 trillion bill won't pass. And I think Nancy Pelosi knows that. She definitely knows that. And Joe Biden knows that. They all know that, right? That's the most likely scenario. And then the next most likely scenario is that none of it gets passed because the progressives stand their ground and say, we're not going to vote for this, okay? But historically, that's not what the progressives have done. Historically, the progressives have not used their power to just say, you know what, screw everything. We'll hold everything up if we don't get what we want, which is exactly what Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema have been doing the whole time during the Biden administration. So it's funny because Nancy Pelosi is acting like she wants the 3.5 trillion as well as the 1 trillion. She wants both at the same time, but I'm not exactly convinced because the deal that she made with the moderate Democrats does not guarantee that $3.5 trillion at all. If anything, it guarantees a vote on the $1 trillion bill, which is what she said she wasn't going to do unless she had the Senate pass the $3.5 trillion bill, unless she can get a vote on both at the same time. So she's not actually getting what she promised, which tells me that she's kind of stringing the progressives along to try to get this $1 trillion bill passed. That's what it kind of seems like to me. I don't know, right? I don't know. But that's how I'm breaking down the situation. But I don't know, right? I could be wrong about this. Nancy Pelosi could sincerely want to try to get both done. But at the same time, you got to understand, I mean, the moderates have been pressuring Nancy Pelosi to be like, yo, let's just forget about this 3.5 trillion and let's just do the 1 trillion. Right? But Nancy Pelosi just can't do that. As Speaker of the House, you got to understand, the majority for the Democrats is narrow. So if Nancy Pelosi says, you know what, forget the 3.5 trillion, progressives are motivated to say, you know what, we're just going to vote no and just sabotage everything. If you get the progressives to vote yes in September with the idea that they might get the 3.5 trillion, right, that could be your best leverage to get the 1 trillion passed. So, like I said, guys, I love analyzing stuff. Like, it is a lot of different scenarios that can play out. And it really kind of shows how the game is played in terms of legislation, which really is what affects this country, right? This is the stuff that actually really matters. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.